Europe, 1347. Death walks the streets. The Black Death, like a waking nightmare, wiped out half of the continent's population in less than 5 years. Imagine this. For every 2 friends you had, only one would survive. To the people of that time, the world was a place solely for suffering. The church preached life has no value. Focus only on death and the afterlife. We call this era the Dark Ages. Yet, right in the middle of this vast graveyard, a miracle occurred. A strange paradox. The population plummeted, so the survivors became wealthier. Those who survived. The plague had an epiphany: life is too short to simply suffer. Let us live, and let us create. And thus, from the ashes of death, the fire of the Renaissance was ignited. A movement that divided human history into before and after. But where exactly did this rebirth begin?
Why Italy? Why Florence? The Italians walked daily in the shadow of their ancestors' magnificent ruins. They saw the massive arches of ancient Rome and asked themselves, "We were once the engineers of the world. Why are we now stuck in the mud of the Middle Ages?" They were thirsty to reclaim that lost glory. But the gunpowder for this cultural explosion arrived in 1453. When Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire, fell, thousands of Greek scholars fled to Italy, clutching the works of Plato and Aristotle in their arms. These books were buried treasures. Europeans were shocked as they translated them. The Greeks and Romans weren't just warriors. They possessed mathematics, astronomy, and a philosophy that celebrated the human rather than shaming him. They called this new way of thinking humanism. But let's be honest. Ideas without funding are just dreams. The Renaissance needed a financier. And that is where the Medici family enters the stage. They weren't kings, they were bankers. At the time, lending with interest usury was considered a mortal sin, and the church threatened bankers with hellfire. To cleanse their conscience and essentially buy their way into heaven, the Medici decided to pour their legendary wealth into beauty. They became the ultimate patrons of the arts. Lorenzo de' Medici, the known as Lorenzo the Magnificent, was the greatest godfather of art in history. He discovered a teenage Michelangelo and raised him in his own palace like a son. Without the Medici's blank checks, we might have neither the statue of David nor the Sistine Chapel today. The Renaissance was the illegitimate child of money and genius. Florence had a massive problem. The city's cathedral had stood open to the sky for years. The span was so wide that no architect knew how to build a dome that wouldn't collapse. People said it was impossible. Until a stubborn and brilliant man named Filippo Brunelleschi stepped forward. He had spent years studying ancient Roman bricks. Brunelleschi proposed a plan that everyone mocked. Building a dome without scaffolding. But he did it. By laying bricks in a herringbone pattern, he constructed what is still the largest brick dome in the world. This mathematical gaze extended to painting as well. Renaissance artists discovered perspective. They figured out how to create depth on a flat canvas. Paintings suddenly became three-dimensional. Light and shadow, chiaroscuro, breathed life into the images. When people first saw the works of Da Vinci or Raphael, they gasped. They thought the figures inside the frames were actually alive. The Renaissance taught us the concept of the polymath, or the Renaissance man. Look at Leonardo da Vinci, a painter, anatomist, military engineer, and botanist. He would sneak into morgues in the dead of night to dissect corpses, just to understand how facial muscles move when we smile. The result was the Mona Lisa. However, all this knowledge could have been lost again if not for a German named Johannes Gutenberg. In 1440, he invented the printing press. This was the internet of the 15th century. The price of a book, which once cost as much as a farm, plummeted. Knowledge escaped the monopoly of the priests and reached the common people. Now, anyone could read the Bible and even critique it.
But every light casts a shadow. Not everyone welcomed this freedom and beauty. By the late 15th century, corruption in the church was rampant, and the people were exhausted. A radical friar named Savonarola rose up in Florence. He screamed that the Renaissance was the work of the devil, and that all these luxuries would lead them to hell. His sermons were so fiery that they hypnotized the masses. In February 1497, an event took place known as the Bonfire of the Vanities. People gathered in the town square and voluntarily threw their mirrors, fine clothes, musical instruments, and poetry books into the fire. The tragedy was that even a great painter like Botticelli, consumed by fear, threw some of his own masterpieces into the flames with his own hands. This moment was the alarm bell signaling the end of Florence's golden age.
The Renaissance in Italy eventually faded due to religious wars and the Inquisition. Galileo was put on trial, and freedom was restricted. But it was too late. The seed of rationalism had already been sown. The movement shifted to Northern Europe, eventually sparking the scientific and industrial revolutions. Today, we are the children of the Renaissance. The right to question, the right to be curious, and the belief that humans can change their destiny are gifts inherited from that era. The Renaissance taught us that even after the darkest plagues, humanity has the power to build the most beautiful domes. Which part of this history fascinates you the most? The genius of Da Vinci or the power of the Medici? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe to join us on our next journey through history.